Hello, guys. Welcome to the FU Money Podcast. FU Dane.
FU Hugh.
Today, we're going over what?
Savings.
Savings.
The good, the bad, and the ugly.
What did we go over last week?
That was emergency savings fund.
And this is different. So you're to learn, the first part of the episode, we just finished it. Like half of it was just us talking about theory.
Yeah.
And why it's so important, mindset. Towards the middle of the end.
Actually, the viewers might be interested to tune in because Mr. Hugh Carnahan, the man, the myth, the legend, actually shares pro tips on what he personally does for savings. So
middle to the end.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that you do that. I'm saying that I do that.
Yes.
And I get the mindset of why I would do that.
Yeah. Which I love.
And then we get into like a savings rate. So if you haven't listened to anything before, we're trying to build on everything. So we started with tracking, then we went to budgeting, then we went to emergency savings, and now we're in the savings section. And so we're going to keep rolling along. Anything else before the viewers get started on the actual episode?
No, sir. I'm just getting excited about savings.
Save your ass.
And save some time.
And here we are. Today, Dane, what are we talking about?
We're talking about savings.
We just talked about emergency savings. And again, disclaimer for those of you just tuning in. One, we're trying new stuff out. We have some new equipment. If it sucks, sorry in advance. Information should still be good.
Yeah.
At least I like to think so.
Right. And weirdly enough, we're wearing the exact same thing we were last week.
That's shocking.
In the exact same place.
So again, we're at a brewery, 4x4 brewery. And if you're in Nixon, you should give them a check out. And if we are interrupted, this is an active brewery right now. They happen to lend us a room, but if they kick us out, that's what happens.
Yeah. So Hugh, let's jump right into it. We talked about emergency savings funds, and we spent quite a bit of time giving the good and the bad and some things to do and some things definitely not to do, right?
Right.
And in that segment, we talked about there's emergency savings and then you should move into savings. And I said, like savings, which birthed this episode about what the hell is savings if you have an emergency savings?
Right. That's a great question, Dane. And a lot of it's going to come down to goals, but we're going to kind of start from a little bit before then. We're setting up this whole system, the podcast, to bring a novice investor who doesn't know anything, all the way through from I have no financial literacy, all the way through to, hey, I really understand things at a high level and I'm going to be investing at a high level or attempt to. Disclaimer, I'm a huge piece of garbage and shouldn't be trusted with money. Here I sit, a 2.5 millionaire. I did that because I learned what to do. And then I built systems to protect me from me. And so this next video about savings is going to be a little bit more to that.
Yes.
This will probably be our last video before it divulges into a massive pissing contest in whatever platforms, comments people are listening to this on. Because after this step, actually possibly this step even, is so contested on where you should be putting your money.
Yeah, absolutely.
After this, we're going to dip our toe into the investing world. Before this, go back and listen to them, is, where to start, tracking, budgeting, emergency savings. Now we're into savings.
And good advice any guru or financial expert would give you.
Right.
Up until, like you said, this point.
And the reason why we're joking about this, why would people have a pissing contest over it, is because starting from here, there's a lot of opinions. And so I think what we're going to do is we're going to just introduce concepts, and then we're going to have it in what we think is a decent order. And at the end, we're going to talk about a few orders, mathematically speaking, which is the highest way that you should go through funding operations. There are some emotional ways, and there are some tactical ways, and there are some Dave Ramsey people, and there's some crazy high leverage, take all your money and throw it on black, right? And we'll talk about a lot of them, but we're going to just expand the knowledge of the average person who has no financial literacy from, hey, here are these things, and then we'll worry about putting them in the next order. So if you're upset that we're talking about savings now, I understand. And we'll keep pushing forward. Please comments about it because it helps the algorithm.
And this is also an important topic because here in the United States specifically, we often live 5%, negative of our means. We are always in debt at minimum 5%. Of our income. So meaning you've spent everything and you're living in 5% to 10% in excess. So you're in a deficit.
Right. So if you are, I don't know, about negative 5%, I think is more like negative 30%.
Yeah, I read that statistic like 20 years ago, so it's probably way worse.
And to Dane's point, we're talking about saving at this point, and savings, a lot of people disagree with. And you're like, what do you mean people disagree with savings? It's because savings sitting in a bank account is what people think about. And savings in a bank account get eaten alive by inflation. There was, and I don't know the exact numbers, but I was on a Reddit 3 or 4 days ago, and it was in the personal finance section, and there was some guy posted, and he was like, "Oh, my grandma, we were cleaning out my grandma's house who passed away, and she has 200,000 pesos or something, and it was stacks and stacks of cash from a long, long time ago, and they had done something to their currency, and basically she had saved all of this her whole life, and it turned into the equivalent of something negligible like $400.
Yeah, I was going to say.
And that was due to inflation. And so that's why people don't like savings, because they think it's a waste of their money to put money into savings. And other people will then go blow their money on boats and cars and video games and TVs. So,
well, and something that you're really getting at is in the American household, we're not taught to save. The majority of people are spenders, or with leverage. Go ahead.
If you're not American, don't feel bad. Like, I'm going to say in the West, we're not taught to save.
Right.
Germans are a little better.
A lot of Europeans I met don't live with any debt, so they're further along in that way.
Right. They're still blowing, or they're nearly paycheck to paycheck, but they don't have debt. Americans are like, I got like 60 grand around, whatever.
Yeah. And so we're just not taught to save. We don't instill the habits of saving. We don't put in the systems and automation and process of savings. And then when you're saving, we don't know what we're saving for. And we hear terms like 401k, company matching this, and that might be someone's only vehicle of savings, which is a different episode. FHA or SHA, as well as 401ks and company matching programs are going to be discussed at great length. What I'm talking about is savings.
Right. And so I'm going to back this up, and I'm going to say a savings rate first. So in my opinion, a savings rate, not like a savings account rate, but a savings rate is a percentage of your income that you should be saving per month. So
go on.
I remember my uncle, who I was terrified of when I was younger.
Sherman,
Uncle Sherman. He's very, very good with math. And he'd teach me math, and he'd hit me with sticks if I didn't do math right, which is,
very Asian.
The way, Asian, whatever. And I love it because I'm better at math now. But not too good at math. I was faster than he was. Long story short, I must have been like 12 or 13. He pulled me aside one day and he said, Hugh, Americans, actually he said white people save no money. Every paycheck, if they get $100, they spend all $100. Maybe they save 10, but then they'll go raid that. Chinese, we save 50% of your paycheck. So if you get $100, put $100 away. And this is not red China. This is like older ways of thinking, pre-1911, fall of the empire, whatever. Empire did nothing wrong. We go back, and then he says Japanese save 60%. Right. And that was one of the very few things I remember as a very, very young kid. So the first thing, if you're listening and you're older, like just bear that, take that with a grain of salt. If you're young and you have not gone into debt yet, you're 18, you're 22, you're about to start your first job, take whatever the paycheck is, and if you can save 50 to 60% of your paycheck coming out, that means you're offered $100,000 a year, and you should be pocketing, half of what that is, trying to live off.
Or after tax.
Oh, so $100,000 a year will be before taxes. We can do the math, but
so you're saving, or your take home is 75, then you, in his example, would be living on half of that.
Yeah, if your take home is $7,500 a month, which to some people listening are going to be like, holy shit, people are paid that much. Yes, people are paid that much. But okay, let's say your take home is $4,000. Try to live off of $2,000 and save $2,000. If your take home is, $5,000, try to do $2,500. If your take home's $6,000, try to do $3,000. And the reason why is eventually we're going to get you to a standpoint where you start investing the difference, not just saving the difference. And when you start saving half of your income, you start being able to do things and behave differently than the rest of the population. Unreasonable things. So Dave Ramsey has a quote, which I do like, which is live like no one else now so you can live like no one else later. And that's talking about sacrificing short-term gains for long-term thinking, strategic thinking.
Yeah.
And one thing I wanted to say up front is, I still haven't talked about savings yet in the way traditional people start talking about savings. So Dane, knowing that preface, what is savings?
Savings, in probably the best example or scenario I can give, is after you have been responsible and you've put emergency savings aside, you've gotten into the habit of paying yourself first. Savings would be in addition to the 3 to 6 months of reserve you've set aside in case something goes wrong in your life. And that savings is for a ton of different things, to your point earlier, depending on your values, depending on your goals, depending on your family and your family dynamic. Maybe you're married, maybe you're not, maybe you have children. There's a million things that we could give you advice on, but the most important thing is it's the habit of learning to live in a way that you can save outside of what you've already put away to protect yourself. That's savings.
That's the fundamental underlying thing. And now we're going to get into more strategic things and tactics you can use immediately. So,
Dave Ramsey also says one purpose of money and doing really well with money is to have fun. And a lot of people don't take that into account when it comes to savings. They'll just be spenders to have fun. They don't think to save to have fun.
Right.
I thought that was pretty cool. Well done.
Actually, it can become like a hobby to save money, but you can also go overboard. So we still haven't given you guys any useful tactics, and we're going to do that now. But just know the underlying thing is save as much as you possibly can now so that you can go. So now we're going to transition to what people think of when they think savings is where are you putting that? What bucket are you putting that in? Mm-hmm. And so the very first bucket that most people think of is my least favorite bucket, and is just a savings account in a bank.
Oh, the old bank account. I have one of those.
Okay.
In fact, I happen to know that you and your business heads have 86 of those.
That's right. We have 86 bank accounts that are savings accounts. Now there's a checking account, even worse. Oh my gosh. A lot of people will open, and I'm going to bring you guys in for a secret. Banks try to screw you because they'll have you open a checking account. Checking account's meant for multiple uses many times a month. A savings account should have very little activity. It should be paying you more. How much more? Almost nothing. For those of you that are in the United States or anywhere that matters in the world, that's like saying a 22 long rifle and a 32 ACP is the same amount of savings. Like, it's basically negligible. We're going to step it up a little bit more for folks that, there's that. But there's that next bucket, which is just please don't put it in a checking account. Put it in a savings account. And then we're going to talk about high yield savings accounts.
Yeah. And even in a lot of local banks, you'll be driving down the highway, at least here in Missouri, and I see probably 7, 8 billboards that are talking about the amount of interest and rate of return you will get by just placing your savings somewhere for 12 months. And any bank can offer this, and it will range from anywhere from 1% up to 5.7. I saw up the road.
That was probably a CD, which we'll get into later.
Exactly. These are areas in which your bank, a traditional banking institution, will offer you to incentivize you to put your money somewhere for an extended period of time.
So what does that mean? So that's a CD. We're not going to get into that now. Just a standard savings account. Yeah. I put $100 at the beginning of the year in a savings account that returns 4%. How much money do I have at the end of the year?
$4 minus inflation and tax.
Well, in theory, just the numbers in there. We'll get into that one later.
$104.
$104 is what you're going to get. So that is a savings account. 4% sounds like a lot because it's a, quote, guaranteed savings. Most, I don't want to say advanced level, most people that are like a teeny bit financially literate very quickly realize that savings is probably not where they want to keep their money. So Your CD, your very fancy pants CD, that's 5.7%. You put that same $100 in, and you have to lock it up for 12 months, a year. So you can't remove your $100. How much do you have at the end of that?
I blanked it. I can't do the math.
Oh, it's $105.70.
Yeah.
So
sounds right, but I'll check your math.
Yeah. And then if you keep it in there another year, now it's $105.70 times the additional 5.7%. Here's where it goes wrong and why I generally don't like that. Well, hold on. We're going to go one more bucket, right? So there's your checking account, which is usually nothing. There's your savings account, which is very little. You just had a CD, which we're not going to get into, but it's a terrible bucket to put in. You have what's called a money market account.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a slightly more interest-bearing account. And the last one, usually have banks dedicated to this. It's called a high-yield savings account. Your local bank probably has one. Ally Bank has one. Yada has one. It is a high-yield savings. So what is a high-yield savings account versus a savings account?
Honestly, I don't know, because I'm not a great high-yield saver.
So a high-yield savings account just means it's got slightly higher interest than everybody else.
Right.
So if a savings account at your local bank's 4%, then they're probably
going to match or higher.
They're going to be at like 4.5%.
Mm-hmm. I do have a question on savings. I think this is on a lot of people's minds. Okay. Yeah. It's the smart saver, or someone who's a little bit more, I think, like on top of maybe their emergency fund and paying themselves, and they're done well up to this point. They're like, cool, I'm getting into the savings game. What about liquidity? Where do I keep some savings that I can grab on hand at any time, and I'm not worried about it returning me 4%? I'm not worried about, what happens to just savings?
This is the emergency fund, where I would put it personally, is a high yield savings account.
Because it's still liquid enough.
It's liquid usually that day. If you have it in a separate bank, like let's say Yada or Ally Bank, it's 3 business days to get to you. For the most part, any emergency that pops up, again, go watch the emergency fund episode. But if you need savings to buy a big purchase, you probably have 3 business days of time. So if you need it on Thursday, you can probably have the money by Monday.
Okay.
Pretty dang liquid as far as liquid's concerned.
Sure. And keeping some liquidity in any portfolio or an investment is smart, because sometimes you just need cash in like a 20-minute period.
If you need cash in 20 minutes, then you should have some amount of cash in, like physical cash in your safe.
Yeah.
If you want instantaneous stuff, then it's a debit or credit card.
Right.
And then the next best is going to be savings.
So you brought up debit and credit card. And the reason I want to touch on this for a second, a lot of people will use those as their emergency fund, as a backup with a high credit limit, right? And I've done this.
A credit card, not a debit card.
Right. I have been in this place, so no judgment. Like truly, my emergency plan was, I have $30,000 limit on this credit card. I keep it at 0, so if things go downhill, I can just throw it on that card at worst case scenario.
It's a fantastic question, and we're going to get into the dedicated credit card episode. So this is a teaser for you.
Perfect. What I was leading to is people also save in this way, where it's like, I might put 5,000 in a savings account, but I also know that I have a limit on a credit card to have another 5,000. So if that went bad, I could move that money over quickly, because there's a point system. There's a million advantages to using a credit or debit card. Do you think that's smart and a safe way to plan, where you have the money, but you also have a credit card in which you could use and instantly pay back? What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts, and this is just my opinion based on where I'm at. So my thoughts are, step one is you need to have an emergency fund. If you have your emergency fund bucket filled, then you have a savings account. If you're dipping into your savings consistently, then you're living above your means. So your day-to-day expenses and your credit card game you can play, that's fine. An occasional big purchase, like let's say you're going to just like be a baller and be like, I'm a gangster. I'm going to buy a freaking car and a credit card. I'm going to buy this car and a credit card because I can for some reason, because you have a high credit limit. Sweet. Pay that card off immediately with your savings and generate the points, right? We're going to do a whole credit card pointing, travel hacking episode later. That's cool.
Yeah.
But for the most part, if day to day you're using a credit card and then you're dipping into your savings to pay that credit card, that's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion. It's not mathematically efficient. It's not wrong. It's just not efficient. if you can pay on your credit card and whatever is in your checking account for your monthly expenses and you pay that off, that's completely fine because you're just gaming the system if you're responsible enough not to go into super credit card debt.
I was going to say, but Hugh, I'm someone who likes to spend on the credit card to gain the points, and that I always pay it off every single month dutifully because I'm really disciplined. Oftentimes is not actually the case.
Right.
It has got me in hot water being like, I'm going to put it on the card. I'm going to collect the points. I always pay it off. And I'm actually quite a disciplined person. And I have still noticed at times, every 6 months or a year, a balance will go unchecked or something that I put on something, Amazon especially, oh, I'll get the 5% back or the 6 month no interest, whatever. And of course I'm going to pay that off next month. But it was such a small amount, it's out of sight, out of mind.
Right.
So my bank is getting deducted these small minimum payments for some crap on Amazon I got like a year ago.
Right.
And I'm like, are you kidding me? Because I wasn't disciplined enough to go in and just pay it off. So sometimes that's dangerous. It's not always the best strategy.
And we're going to have a full-blown episode on just bank fees, which piss me off.
God.
So stick around for that because there's sneaky ways to do that. Going to the savings account, back to the savings account real quick. If you were at like Wells Fargo or Bank of America or Chase Bank, one of these big mega banks, and you're listening to this right now,
I work for the devil.
No, not listening. If you use them as a bank account.
Oh yeah.
Not if you work
You're
for
cool if you use them. If you work for them, you need a new job.
So if you use them, my local bank's giving me 4%. Bank of America and Chase right now are like 3%, 3.4%. It's so big, they don't care. That means for $100 in there, they're going to give me $3 at the end of the year. If I had $1,000 in there for a year, didn't touch it, they're going to give me $1,030. I'll have $1,030 at the end of the year. Okay, now I want to transition from the checking account, which usually has nothing, no interest, to a savings account, which is meh, to a high yield savings account. Okay, now you early on in this episode, you brought up talking about a big caveat. What is the cons to having money in savings? It's
easy to spend.
Okay, that's probably a bigger con than one I was trying to lead him to.
Oh, what were you getting at?
Well, so it starts with an I.
Investing
in
dependent inflation. The sneaky eye.
The sneaky eye. Okay, right. So what is inflation for people who have never heard the term before?
Oh my gosh, it's when the gross domestic product. No, I'm not going to get into the actual definition.
I was like, oh,
we're getting into the macroeconomics. Inflation is what you're seeing every day when you go to the store or when you go to pick up something from your nearest fast food restaurant, and what you once paid was $7 for a Happy Meal is now $11.50. That is inflation that is outgrowing a lot of our day-to-day wages and economic spending power. And why I say it's in front of you, and that's the best way to understand what inflation is, because every time you go to the pump and it fluctuates higher, every time you go grocery shopping, all of our taxes are going up. That's trying to meet inflation, which we all get to pay for, which is super fun.
Well, yeah, we're going to keep the politics out because that'll take us way too long.
Yeah.
But the short answer is, in the bank, you put $100 in. At the end of the year, so the last few years, inflation's been crazy. It's something like 11%. So when you go to the grocery store and eggs used to cost $3.
Yep.
Now eggs cost $5.
$7.50.
$7.50. It's a very high amount.
Yeah.
The cost of things are going up. Now, most savings accounts do not keep pace with inflation. So if you have $1,000, we're going to use the same $100 example. You have $100 in your checking account, or your savings account, and that 4% one in my fancy bank, my local bank, huzzah, they give me 4%. At the end of the year, it's going to have $104 in there. But we had 11% inflation. And so at the end of the year, my $100 that was in the bank account can only buy me $89 worth of goods that had I spent the $100 a year before could have bought me. So I'm really at a negative 5%, negative 6% inflation, or 7% inflation, or sorry, whatever, interest rate.
Hugh's the math guy.
I'm terrible at math. Well, didn't be enough. So the short answer is people have a big problem with savings. If you're slightly inclined, to any kind of finances, most people very quickly realize that savings is a very poor investment, which is why I rarely use the term investment at all. The reason I would put money into a savings account is because I haven't chosen what investment I'm going to be doing.
Or short-term goal.
Right. Yeah. If you're saving for I have to buy a car, or my wife and I want to buy a house, then you can put money into a short-term goal to build up, to get the down payment for the house, or get the down payment for that car. Or you want to buy an Xbox or a PS5 or whatever, which you about short-term goal for a want, you should save towards that until you have enough money to buy the thing.
And let me paint a picture of what this looks like when you don't have any of this in place. So I was a high income earner with no savings plan. You know, as I've talked about on previous episodes, what do you call them? Dinks?
Dual income, no kids.
Dual income, no kids. Great place to be sometime. And there was just an excess amount of money coming in. So it all funneled into a checking account. That checking was, money is in big bucket. Man wants thing. Man sees money in bucket.
Woman wants thing. Woman wants to take a trip.
We reach hand into bucket. We pay for thing. And I never think about it again. I don't think about high yields. I don't think about savings. I just used this bucket as a catch-all that then did whatever I wanted. And the problem with doing that is quickly you realize, especially if the income from both sides doesn't stay consistent, that you find the bucket being empty more often than not, no matter what the income level is, because there was no savings plan, there was no automation, there was no habits around putting money into some smart places or some places that protect you from yourself.
Right. And for those of you who are just new to this, I happen to, on my way out of college, age 20, age 21, had a professor who gave a shit, grabbed me by the shoulders and shook me and was like, Hugh, do this one thing. And it was set up these buckets. Dane didn't have that person.
No.
And so one of the ways I got Dane to come work with me, for me initially, and now with me, because we're partners now, was I said, you've had 10 years of 200 grand a year, just you. Your wife makes 100 grand a year. You guys are pulling in a crap ton of money. Look in your bank right now. How much do you have left? Don't tell me the number. Are you happy with the number? And the number was probably very alarmingly close to zero. Or
it was within 10 to 20 grand with also no game plan of what happened once we transitioned out of the military.
And that was and that's a very shocking thing. And so what I said to Dane, the promise I made was, come here, help me, and I'll show you how to be an investor, because you should be able to quit indefinitely. Count up the money you should have made over the last 10 years. How much of it do you have left? And the answer is, I have nothing left because I never did any planning. It is very, very easy up front to just do the planning and then set it and forget it and automate it, to then in the future never have to think about it. You can have an equally epic life. You can go on all the trips, you can do all the things, because the humans were very creative. We're going to adjust to whatever our circumstances is. Their circumstance that they started with was one big bucket. Look at the big bucket. Instead, you're saying, I'm going to create a bunch of little buckets over here.
Yeah.
And those little buckets are going to protect me from me.
Yeah.
And then the bucket that we look at, which is a fun bucket, we're going to do whatever the hell we want with it.
Yeah.
Instead, this is human nature. We just generally do whatever the hell we want with whatever our checking account is. Don't think about it. And then we wake up at 65 and Harry Carey is the only answer.
Well, and here's the illusion. There was a lot of cheddar in that bucket. And yet there was so much cheddar, I didn't think about any of the small buckets.
Right.
And so when the cheddar bucket was no longer there, neither were the little buckets.
Right.
And so what that does is, that's when we are faced with panic. We're faced with like getting painted into a corner. Making smart choices could have been the road that set up a better path. I don't know how to say that in a better place, right? Like earlier education or access to mentors, there's a million things. And I can sit and say, oh man, if I could have just got started at 14 or 15, like I'm setting up my son, how life would have been different. But here's the reality. no matter at what age you get started, and I'm a late bloomer, so I jumped late into the game. The amount, it's like compounding interest. All of a sudden, you will find that your experience and your ability to set your foundation and get caught up starts to also compound. So that 20 years of me maybe doing some smart moves or whatever may have set, let's say, some sort of financial foundation. What I noticed is because I got late into the game, I worked harder, I dug deeper, I started taking more risks, and it was almost like it was a, what do you call that, slide curve, right? Either way.
Exponential curve.
An exponential curve, right? So at some point you will be able to catch up to yourself, and so don't feel like it's too late. I started way behind the game. I'm a late bloomer in almost everything, and yet you'll figure it out. Life has a way of helping you catch up.
He didn't even have a beard when I met him. So.
That's right. I was beardless. That's so weird.
No, but on a serious point, so like, and the investing I specifically promised I'd teach Dane, which he's now mastered. And if you go listen to our emergency fund episode, you'll know that we're not all perfect all the time. There is a mechanism I think will work in almost every country, right? If you're in the UK, you're in the West, right? If you're not in a war zone, you're not in small, there's a good chance it'll work for you. Is real estate investing. And Dane's been able to go from, I don't know anything financially, to, okay, it's tight right now, but I'm very, very advanced and caught up. I'm not only caught up, I'm surpassed most people my age.
Well, I'm finding that everyone, weirdly enough, that I knew most of my young adult life is asking me for advice now, which is really weird because I would have thought I'd be the last person to be able to tell you how to invest, how to analyze real estate, and a lot of these areas that we're going to cover. And so, like I said, you will catch yourself up and probably surpass a lot of people that are your peers and people who you're surrounded by, and people who maybe even played it safe, done all the textbook investing strategies and investment things, and they have a broker or whatever. That's a different episode. Yeah. But they often come to me and say, hey, how do you do a double close? What is this on real estate? How would you look at this deal? And I'm like, finding myself giving all of these people advanced tips, tricks, and advice for anything from, to your point, I came out here knowing nothing about real estate and investing, to being able to source, analyze, remodel, restructure, and build out a deal, close it, sell it, all as a one-man team.
And so, Dane, I want you guys to listen to this too, because we're starting you guys from nothing, and we're building and building and building and building, and we're going to go through the traditional the traditional methods, and then we're going to introduce you to real estate later. And Dane, who had the opportunity for 10 years of $300,000 a year to just freaking stack cash and, quote, do it all right and have a 60% savings, whatever, right? No one does that. But he could have, but he didn't. But the people who did, Dane's in front of them now, and it's been 3 years. And it's because we're teaching you just very, very basic fundamentals that have not changed since anything. You go to the Middle Ages, you go to, I don't know, Jesus walking around, you go to whatever. Yeah. Nothing's changed. The math is the same. When I'm long dead, in the future, if humans are still around, the math will still be the same. The fundamentals are still the thing. Yeah. So what we teach you should be timeless, even if our numbers change in the future.
Well, and it's intimidating. I would have been intimidated 3 years ago by half the stuff we do or even talk about. And I'll be sitting in rooms now, and I'll be like, that's so weird. I understand all this, or we've done this, or whatever that is, or we're guiding other people to do that. And to what Hugh's getting at is, you can be someone like me who had never done anything in real estate or in the investing world, and quickly accelerate your learning to be at a place that if you were to hand me $1 million today, I could turn that into $10 million. If you were to hand me $1 million 4 or 5 years ago, I may have been able to turn it into 1.1.
Right.
Does that that's the difference? That's the power of compounding knowledge.
And it's knowledge. It really is knowledge. So I know, again, this is a savings episode, but it's so much of our shit's based on theory and just mindset. And I don't want everyone to get shut off, but here's the short answer. I was the guy who, quote, did everything right from age 21 until I was 28. And I, quote, saved and did all the things. I invested in the compound. And over the entire lifetime of that 8-10 years working in corporate America, I was able to save $220,000.
It's pretty impressive.
That sounds fancy. Cool. I'm on track to be a bajillionaire, whatever, a millionaire by age 68, and then have a broken hip or whatever. In 2019, I started with a 220 grand. Actually, I started with 180 grand, but I owed money in taxes. But I didn't pay the taxes yet. I was like, I'll figure it out. I'm probably fine. Let's take risk, fuck it. And right now, today, it's just been 5 years. And I turned that $220,000 into $6 million. Outside of that, I simultaneously helped some very select investors who you don't get to be a part of go from a very small amount to about $44 million. Now, you guys might glaze over your head. $44 million in 5 years. Holy crap. Don't let commas scare you, because the fundamentals matter and they're the same. Never, an expert never doesn't do the fundamentals. And so we're going to spend hours teaching you. We're going to talk about $50 at a time. And when we're going to bring you slowly through, oh yeah, here's 10 grand there, 5 grand there. If you're wherever you're at, if you're like, man, I got 10 grand in my savings account, I feel like, I finally made it. I can remember when I first had 10 grand in my savings account. And now that doesn't even feel like my 100 grand in the savings account, because if I go 1 month, I'll screw it up and I'll just have no money, because that's how much my expenses have ballooned to. So it's the fundamentals. It's not about how much, it's about what are the fundamentals.
Yeah. And as you grow, you'll break through certain mental barriers. Like you said, 10,000 seemed like a big deal. Mm-hmm. And then now you look back and you're like, oh, that's a very limited or small sum of money compared to what you're used to now. Your mindset rises with your ability and your experience. I had that same thing. The first time I ever made over 100 grand in a year, I was just like, blown away. I watched The Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith, and I was like, oh, could you imagine? Like, he did what it took and he made 100 grand. He was like in tears. Yeah.
Remember the $5?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
He was like, oh my God, that was my only $5.
Absolutely.
That's how I feel most of the time.
Yeah. And then I was like, whoa, I broke that threshold. And then it was like 200, like to your point, early on in my career, I was like, I'm making like $200,000. I feel like I hit the jackpot. And now 200,000 seems very small to me in the scheme of money and growth and wealth, but I just couldn't have imagined myself making that much earlier. Now, just the same thing. You may not have imagined yourself with a fully funded emergency fund and savings and a foundation of financial literacy and investing in things, commercial, real estate, whatever it is, Airbnb. But then you'll blink once you commit to that path, and we've done all of those. I sit and talk to people in rooms, and they're like, oh, what kind of real estate do you? And I was like, well, I guess we've done commercial, residential, middle term, short term. We've done private lending. And they're like, what the hell? And it doesn't click to me that that's a big thing, because it feels normal now. If you would have told me that 3 years ago, I'd have been like, sounds like a guru, like an expert.
Yeah.
And I am not an expert.
And so kind of to wrap this savings episode up, because we got off track of savings.
Yeah.
This is where you could go with savings, right? What we just talked about is where you could go with savings. So savings is a mean to an ends. When I started saving, I had no goal. I was saving in a tax-advantaged account, which was going to be a VTI or EOO, which we'll get into later. But savings is a concept. And I want your takeaway from the video to be, or audio, if you're listening to this, is I'm an incompetent buffoon. And Dane is better than me.
Oh.
And he started from, very late in life. And, quote, I, quote, did it right the entire time. And in 5 years, I've been able to take myself from where I was to a 27x multiple. I've 27x'd my money through knowledge. Dane, who didn't do it right, allegedly, who started super late and figured it out, has all these friends who, quote, did it right. And Dane not only has caught up, surpassed them, and has a skill set that is way better than them. And we're going to go towards that eventually, but I want you to start thinking about being an investor. If you're in a different country, there are different metrics to you, right? We're going to get into 401ks next. We're going to go into into 403Bs. We're going to go into a lot of different areas, but I want you guys to put a pin in that as a temporary thing and know that that temporary thing is still just something that is a temporary spot that could be for investments. So if you're saving, in my opinion, saving is not investing. Saving is for a specific goal.
I love where you're going with that. And I reference this book a lot because it taught me a lot of financial principles early on. It's the 5 lessons a millionaire taught me. So many like wealth or finance books. And he said, wealthy people and rich people are savers. And it is a fundamental and critical step within building wealth. But he actually went a step further. He said they're intentional savers. I know friends of mine, he's a naval officer now, and he's married to a Japanese lady, and she just insists they save. She saves just to save, and it Japanese 60%, whatever it is.
Save to save,
and
save.
And he's like, why are we saving? And she's like, because you save. Like, she couldn't actually answer him, and he's like, I don't care, I want a PS5 or whatever it was,
right.
Tanner. And they went back and forth because in her mind it was great to save, but there was no intentionality. Wealthy investors or wealthy individuals intentionally save for something. It doesn't just sit in an account and get eaten alive by inflation. It doesn't just build to build. There should be some intentionality behind your savings. There should be some, as we talked before, whatever that purpose or whatever your values are can line up with your savings. Without any of that, it's very hard just to throw money into a savings bucket.
And that's why people don't do it. If you're
Exactly
demoralized, right. You're like, I saved and now it's all gone. That's exactly what's happening. If you listen this long, I've got a bonus savings thing, and it's a sneak peek. I'm going to tell you what my savings is. We're going to introduce what the bucket is later. I'm going to tell you what my savings is now. I do not have money in a savings account because I don't like inflation.
Bad, Hugh.
I'm sorry. I have an emergency savings account, and it's in high yield savings bucket. It's in Yada. Anything else, it is in Fidelity, and it buys VTI. Fidelity is a brokerage firm, and VTI buys the entire U.S. stock market. So I'm betting on 2 things. I'm betting that, number one, the United States is still a functioning country. If that doesn't happen, money probably doesn't exist or matter for me, so I have other problems to worry about. And it takes 3 days to get from there to my bank account. It is there. It will always be there because I think of it as a fancy savings account. It provides between 8 and 12% returns, keeping pace with inflation. It may never outpace inflation, but it keeps pace with inflation. Every month, my bank auto drafts $1,000 and it goes to that and it buys more VTI. That is my savings. It's just doing that. It's done that. I don't think about it. It's just constantly happening. That is where I'm at. That is my real amount as of the filming of this video. I should probably allocate more to it, but I'm not. Short answer, if you're saving for a very tactical thing that you're going to use, I'm fine with me personally putting it into a savings account. If I'm saving for savings' sake and I don't know what I'm going to use it for, I'm going to put it into a Fidelity brokerage account, which takes like 2 days to set up, and I'm going to buy either FZROX or VTI. They're both the same thing. Yes, people can comment, argue in the comments that it's not the same. It's effectively the same thing. Shut the hell up. That's my tactical thing. So if you listen this long, that's where I put my money. I'm not telling you to put your money there. I'm telling you that's where I put my money because I don't want it to get eaten alive. If I need it, I will liquidate it. I'll pull it to the thing. I will also give you guys one more thing. I'll give you guys one more big thing. I interact with a lot of millionaires. I interact with a lot of 5 millionaires, 10 millionaires. I interact with a few hundred millionaires, and I have 2 billionaires saved on my phone. Now, will they answer when I call? No, but it's cool flex. I don't know any millionaire or tens of millionaires that are dumb enough to keep $1 million in their bank account. They're always putting it somewhere. Well, what if the market drops? That's what the emergency fund's for. I have 3 to 6 months to figure it out. I'll liquidate something. I'll take a loan out against something to pay it. People with money know that one of the worst ways to put it is in a savings account. So I'm not a fan of savings account. I have my emergency fund and the high yield savings account. Outside of that, my personal savings account is a Fidelity account and it buys VTI every month. That's it.
That's a great tip. And I fundamentally did not understand that for the longest time. Like, yeah, of course I would keep 50 grand in my bank so it's liquid and I can grab it. Why wouldn't I keep all that? And so working together, and same deal, being surrounded by a lot of people who do well in life, the continual consensus is don't leave it into a regular savings account unless it's fund money. That's going to be a bonus episode that I was going to announce later. Fund money, what to do with it, why to save it, and where it should go and why it's important.
And I know we're throwing tons of big numbers at you. I want to stress, we are normal people. When Dane says $50,000, that was more than I made when I graduated high school or college, right? That's a lot. When Dane says I had 50 grand in the account, if you're about to shut this off because you're like, oh my God, I can't, that's crazy amounts of money. And when he's just talking about it so casually, I want you to think from a business perspective or an investment perspective, you're going to get there very, very quickly. I promise you will. And 50 grand to a business or an investment is more like $2,000 to $3,000.
Yeah.
So if you're a normal human and you're like, oh shit, that was a $3,000, oh crap, I had to fix my truck for $1,000. That's what $30,000 to $50,000 feels like for a business. So just kind of use that as a measuring stick. And what we're going to teach and train you guys is how to game the system,
right? From
I don't know anything to how to get there to how to get like business money, but you still just be you. Because you got business money and a business, that's kind of shitty.
Well, and I couldn't agree more. And I'm glad you brought that up because I talk about 20 or 50 grand now in a casual way. But for the longest time, having $300 in my account felt amazing. Like the majority of my young adult life, all I did is work. I've been working since I was 14. And I didn't have the money principle set aside. Otherwise, I probably would have been a retired millionaire by now. Either way, I remember being like, oh, thank God I have $300 in my account. And then if my transmission went out or something and it was $1,200, I felt like completely sunk. So that's real talk. And soon you'll find as you step into the world of investing and you start thinking about these financial principles, it is not uncomfortable to think of having 5,000 in your account and eventually 10,000 and so on and so on, where it'll make you nervous having anything less than 1,000 available. So, but I do remember a time where I was like, yeah, I have 100 to 300 bucks. I was like,
if you're going to have, so people are like, oh, a millionaire has $1 million in their bank account. I'm a 2.5 millionaire. I think I've got hopefully 100 grand in a bank account. That's probably not good, but
you don't have $1 million liquid cash right now?
I don't know any millionaire that is dumb enough to have $1 million in their account. I'll tell you one guy that I know. And this is a rule of thumb that's pretty good. He's a 10 millionaire. He has $1.2 million in the bank account because at the end of this year, he's going to pay $1.2 million in taxes. And he has the money set aside so he doesn't accidentally spend the money. And because his tax burden is so high. And so and that's not even his emergency fund. His emergency fund's probably another 500 grand. So you get 500 grand to buy him time to figure out what to do from something else. If you're listening to this and you're freaking out, I want to promise you, you will get there faster than you think. I would not have believed me saying that 5 years ago. I was just a normal dude.
Yeah.
I made 55 grand a year working for a manufacturing company. I am not a guru. I've stuck to fundamentals that work. The people who got freaking spanked, Dane being one of them, are people who did the fancy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to use all of this as examples. People who just do the fundamentals over and over and over. Professional sports teams, they hire a big fancy coach and they say, we're going to beat the fundamentals into you. Billion-dollar organizations hire $100 million coaches to go to their tens of millions of dollar teams to then teach them the fundamentals. They matter. So if it's just you, get in the habit of putting $50 away a month.
$10.
$10 away a month.
But set a actionable, very doable goal of saying, I want to save my first $1,000. Start there with $1,000. It's big enough to stretch, and it's enough to cover, at least a month of food if you needed it. You know what I mean? Enough things in your life where 1,000 is notable. Make that your first goal. If you're not someone who has been able to at this point have $1,000 sitting aside, make that your number one. Don't start with 10,000 or 100,000 or more.
Right.
Start with $1,000. Make it available and start there.
What is the bare minimum that you say you really need before you get started in investing? We'll say in the United States, but this would probably apply to most of the Western world.
I would honestly say minimum 3 months of your emergency savings set period.
That's after the savings, after emergency savings. How much money do I need to start making investments that actually move the needle?
Oh, you just need a consistent paycheck or money source because you allocate 10% at the minimum to things like you said, VTXI or anything that automates itself. It's small amounts over a long period of time.
Okay.
So I'd say you don't need a lot to start. You need as little as $10 to $50.
Oh, that's the saving part. I'm gonna say, how much what's your goal? What do you think is the goal? Say, I don't know investing. I want to get started. How much, what's my stretch goal to start saving? It's 24.
Yeah.
Do I need 10 grand? Do I need 50 grand?
I would say, real talk, you need 10,000 minimum. I would get to 10,000, but 25 with inflation seems to be the number that allows you to hit the ground running a little bit, and you have enough behind you, which was the mistake I made in an earlier episode. I didn't have enough behind me to set myself up so I didn't run into the problems I'm running in now. So even though it takes you longer to get into the game, I highly recommend spending the time or making the sacrifice to set yourself up a little bit more in the beginning. So, and don't have the fear of missing out. Do it right. Just keep the fundamentals, because when you get into the game, you'll be ready to take action steps to make things happen, and you won't be as held back and learn the lessons the hard way on the back end.
Right. And for me, the answer is going to be, it depends. Do you have a family? Do you not have a family? We're going to be bringing on a guest who's 22 now. He was 21 when we started. Dude had $1,000, bought a duplex. He's about to cash out, refinance that thing, put like 20 grand in his pocket. He's been doing this for a year. Is he a guru? No, he's listening to my advice. Not saying to listen to my advice. I'm saying listen to the fundamentals, learn the fundamentals and do it, because it's all publicly available. Totally doable. You can do it too. This is very repeatable, normal stuff, but you need the fundamentals. Get a savings rate. And yeah, I'd set the target for 10 grand and then 25 grand after that. If a deal comes up, and we're going to get into this way down the line, if a deal comes up and you're like, boom, I need 25 or 30 grand to go buy this thing, pretty much anyone in the United States of America and probably the West, or if you have dollar reduce, then you can probably cough up 25 grand. I'm not saying you have it. You can borrow it from family. You can take 2 jobs. You can say...
you can sell something and cash out.
Sell your stuff. You can flip furniture. You can, I don't know, whatever, rob a bank.
Yeah.
You can do stuff, and the stuff you do can get you to that 25 grand.
Especially 10.
Yeah.
10's a lot more.
10's a good saving point. 25 grand's probably about the low end for like start really investing when we're talking. But like in the meantime, just set it and forget it, automate and let it save, build up in the meantime. We're going to get into the investing later because there's so many more cool stuff, but just automate it, set it, forget it. It's a savings rate. If I'm going to challenge you, Dane said 10%. Oh yeah, you just saved 10%. First off, most people aren't doing that. I'm going to save 50%. And the reason Dane's cringing is because he's got a wife and a kid and a house and a mortgage and 2 cars, 4 pets. And I'm saying save 50%. And so when I'm saying that right now, it hurts because he's not there. He was used to spending.
Yeah.
But let's say I doubled his income tomorrow. He's already saving, living off of less than 50%.
True.
Let's say I 30% increases. Let's say he started a job. Let's say he started doing this thing. Let's say his wife picked up a job or his kid, who knows what it is. Suddenly your income increases, and the number one knee-jerk reaction as humans is to immediately start spending to the income. Don't let that happen. Resist, try to live over 50%. If you can do that, basically nothing we say matters because you're going to figure it out yourself.
Right. Great advice.
We can die tomorrow. No one gets another podcast, and you're going to figure it out because you got your same 50%.
We can talk about that 100% raise. Sweet, man.
All right, guys. Anything else for the viewers before we leave?
Like I said, don't panic. Don't let fear overtake your ability to act. And no matter where you're at, it's never too late to start. I want to say that on every episode because it really isn't. Like me getting started in my 40s, I know people who've gotten started in their mid 40s, 50s. It's not about when, it's about how. And you'll be amazed at what like resources and how things tend to come to you when you have a focal point and a vision and intention for yourself. Just don't be afraid to start.
Nice.
Even if it's with $10.
And I'm going to say, if you want to send us some questions, we get viewer submitted questions. We've been doing some great ones. We cover them in a lot of our interview episodes, and they're a blast. We love it. Send that to fumoney@hughcarnahan.com. And we have a sister podcast about businesses, and that is called Small Biz Rescue. You can check that out. If you want to submit us questions directly, we read every comment, we read every review, and we'll try to answer them. We're getting really good feedback from a lot of our listeners, and thank you for listening. Thank you for taking an hour out of your time. You guys are what make this show possible, and we'll see you next time.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, Hugh and I really, really tried to deliver value in these episodes. So if you learned something, you thought something was funny, you enjoyed a guest, please hop on to wherever it's being hosted, whether that's Spotify or Apple, and drop us a 5-star review. If it's anything lower than that, email us separately. We may or may not respond, but at least all of the things that we did right, let us know. And truly, if we did anything wrong, or if there's guests that you want to see, we aim to please, and you just want to be a guest on the podcast, how can they get a hold of us?
If you want to be a guest or ask us any questions, you can email fumoney@hughcarnahan.com and let us know. Again, we read every comment that comes our way. We actually have 2 or 3 super exciting ideas for shows that have already come our way. Again, we appreciate everything, guys. Remember, real quick, we are not experts at anything. It is not financial advice. Make sure you do your own due diligence. We are for entertainment and educational purposes. Don't listen to random strangers on the internet. We hope to share our message to get as far as we can to normal, everyday folks, blue-collar folks, military folks. This is information that all of us should have. And so if you liked it, please share it. Guys, we will see you in the next episode. Woo!